Hello. I thought today we could just continue with our discussion of Coué's approach. As you can tell, um, I can talk about this a lot, and Coué, as I always say, is the kind of teacher where you can basically just study what he's saying, basically every day, and you're going to get something new out of it continually, in my opinion, if you really are into these ideas that the law of attraction espouses. Coué is going to teach you so much, and I really think that. I think that, irregardless of your, um, preferences when it comes to this stuff, if you want to understand the underlying psychology behind what is happening, imaginatively, mentally in your mind to make these principles work better in your life, Coué's always somebody you can turn to. And, again, I edited a book back, I think, in 2017 called Simple Self-Healing, which, I tried to collect some of Coué's most straightforward teachings and commentary on Coué's teachings in that one small book. It's like 130 pages or something like that. So it's a good example of, or it gives a lot of good examples of Coué at work, and then it also has a lot of selections from Coué's actual teachings and writings. But after I did that, I realized in the last 5 years, I've realized that Simple Self Healing is a very, very, very good book. Not because I edited it, but because just the content's just freaking amazing. But honestly, self mastery through conscious autosuggestion, I always say it, which is the book that Coué, I guess you could say Coué wrote, but also just like a collection of his teachings and people recording, what he did. Self-Mastery Through Conscious Autosuggestion, best law of attraction book I've ever read. It's amazing. And that's what I've been quoting from recently, almost exclusively, in these recent videos about Coué. Today, I just wanted to continue on right after, someone asked him, for those who are sad or who are in distress, what should we do? What should they do? And Coué said, as long as you think I am sad, you cannot be gay or happy. And in order to think something, it is enough to say without effort, I think this thing, etc. Pain or distress, no matter how violent it may be, will disappear. That I can affirm positively. The next paragraph of this section of Self-Mastery Through Conscious Autosuggestion is just this short story which relates this. A man bent with rheumatism arrives, painfully dragging himself with the help of 2 canes. His face shows a dull expression of pain. As the room is filling up, Mr. Coué enters, and after questioning this man, says to him, well, you say you've been suffering from rheumatism for 32 years and you can't walk. Don't be afraid. It's not going to last that long again. Then, after the preliminary experiments, he says, shut your eyes and repeat rapidly, very rapidly, moving your lips, the words, it is going, it is going, it's going, it's going, it's going, it's going. At the same time, Mr. Coué passes his hands along the legs of the patient for about 20 seconds. Now say, you do not suffer anymore. You do not suffer anymore. Now get up and walk. The sick man rises and walks. Faster, faster, still faster. Now since you are walking so well, run, my dear sir, run, says Mr. Coué. And the patient runs joyously, almost as if he has recovered his youth, to the great astonishment of himself and that of the many persons present. Now, this is the kind of stuff that traditionally when we hear law of attraction stories, people call it miracles. This guy had rheumatism, could hardly walk, and he spends a half an hour with Coué, and all of a sudden he's able to run. Coué would not call this a miracle in the traditional sense. Coué didn't actually believe in miracles in the traditional sense. He just said that our body knows what to do if we allow it to do it, if we direct our imagination in the right way. It is capable of doing things that we formerly would think impossible. Emphasis on think impossible. They're not actually impossible. They're possible. He would say if you think that it's possible, it will probably happen if it's at all natural. And it turns out it's natural for somebody who's had rheumatism for 32 years and has trouble walking, period, to all of a sudden be able to run within an hour by applying the kind of method and advice that Coué shares. This kind of recovery didn't happen, every session that Coué had. It's not like everybody had these amazing results right away, but it happened very often. And again, Coué saw thousands of people each year at his clinic and while he was traveling, giving examples of, his method and approach. So this stuff happened regularly. And one reason that it occurred is that Coué explained, what was actually going on underneath and made the person believe that they could heal themselves. He explained this so well. I want to read, I'm going to skip to another part of the book now, if I can find it. Just something related to this. Obviously, everything's related to this in terms of what Coué is saying. But like an example of like this, a very extreme example where it seems to be a miracle, like this person who had rheumatism for 32 years and all of a sudden can miraculously jog. The reason for that is probably this. This is what Coué says. Every malady has a double aspect, unless it is exclusively a mental one. On every physical malady, a mental one grafts itself. If we give to the physical illness the coefficient 1, the mental illness may have the coefficient 1, 2, 10, 20, 50, 100, or more. In many cases, this mental coefficient may disappear instantly, and if it was very high, 100 for instance, while that of the physical affection is 1, only the latter remains, and that is 1/100th of the total illness. That would generally be considered a miracle, yet there's nothing miraculous about it. That's a fascinating, very important paragraph. Quote from Coué. What Coué is saying is that we have a physical illness, a physical problem. And what we have a strong tendency to do is then to mentally imagine the wrong thing about our physical problem, and we make it worse. So in other words, if we have pain and the pain is a 1 on the scale, I'm just giving that example because he says that's like a 1, a coefficient of 1. We then double the pain by giving it mentally a 1 on the scale as well. But we don't only double the pain. A lot of time for a lot of our illnesses and, maladies, our problems, we give 2 times or 10 times or 50 times or 100 times the imaginative problem significance than the actual physical problem. In other words, when someone has rheumatism and it seems terrible and overwhelming and they can hardly walk, and then Coué is able to get them to run within an hour of meeting them, that means that guy who had, rheumatism, his physical issues were a small fraction of the mental issues that he was projecting onto his rheumatism. His rheumatism might be a real thing, but it's like 1 on a scale, while the mental aspect, that imaginative, painful, debilitating aspect was like a 50 or a 100 on the scale. And if we can get rid of these mental coefficients, these imaginary pains that make us suffer so much, if we can get rid of them or largely eliminate them, obviously we're going to feel a heck of a lot better in our day-to-day life. Our physical ailments are usually only a small part of the problem. And the larger problem so often is the mental negative projections we put on our physical ailments. To give a much more mundane example that you might be able to relate to, I remember this spring, I had this weird sinus thing, which I never had before, where I wasn't congested, but there was basically, I thought I had some kind of sinus infection because I wasn't congested at all, but I had a lot of pain in my, above in my forehead and below my eyes, and I wasn't going to do anything about it. I was just going to let it pass, but it kept on happening over a couple days. And I began to think about it. Oh, is this an infection? Do I have to go to the doctor? Is this getting worse? Is this something I have to take care of? I really should go. Why am I not going? Etc. We can all relate to having worrisome thoughts about this, about illnesses. And, the pain didn't seem to be getting better. It seemed to be getting worse after a couple days. So I finally made an appointment to go to a walk-in. And as soon as I made that appointment and knew I was going to the walk-in, I noticed within an hour that it's my pain in my head and my face, the sinus pain was less. And when I actually went to see the walk-in doctor, I said, it's not as bad as it was earlier in the day. And it turned out that it was something that they recommended I get treated, but I didn't have to take antibiotics or anything like that. And that's just a good example of how I had pain. There was some pain there, but then I projected an imaginative pain on top of that, an imaginative fear on top of that of a worst case scenario, and it made the pain much, much worse, exponentially worse. This is why, to tie this into like more quote unquote far out law of attraction stuff, this is why like Richard Dotz in his book Dissolve the Problem, he says if you can just make it so you're only thinking about your problem when you absolutely have to, and you disregard the problem the rest of the time. You don't think of it or think against it or pretend it's not there. You just don't think about it to the best of your abilities. You're just neutral about it being there or not being there. But you stop giving it any imaginative significance. If you can do that, the problem will usually disappear from your life or dissolve or significantly lessen. Because the physical issues we have, or really, you could say basically all issues we have, they tend to resolve themselves much, much better when we don't imaginatively play into them, or if we can imaginatively play into them in some kind of positive way of them expecting them to heal themselves. And of course, most of us do a terrible job of doing this, and we imaginatively think the worst about our problems instead of thinking good thoughts. Once again, the practical power of Coué, you see that it's practical, and at the same time, it seems to get miraculous results, because if we apply this stuff more fully in our lives, we may be shocked at how much better we feel. And we can sometimes get such astounding results that it really does feel like a miracle.